Well, again, I'm back with another in a little ad hoc series that I'm doing about some basic concepts in Exceed, kind of a supplemental to the Excess Exceed series, inspired by a conversation that happened in Breakfast Club recently about just how do you start getting good. The intent here is to get you to a place where you can stop kind of playing cards at random and start to make sensible plays and maybe start to develop the beginnings of a longer term strategy. Not going to get too much into, economic management and things like that. We're really just going to be thinking about how to make good short-term decisions and form plays that are kind of strong in a vacuum. Uh, in the first little segment I recorded earlier today, we were talking about breakpoints, how to stun guardy things, and specifically how to overturn sweep. The various interactions that allow you to hit for 7 power or otherwise deal with a very difficult card. And by going through that process, we started to think about a specific matchup of Kai versus Soul from Kai's perspective and what he can do as a character to deal with a card like that. And one of the things that we settled on, just kind of extemporizing about what options a character might have and the ways that taking this one concept of breakpoints can start to spiral out into strategizing, was that, well, maybe Kai would be particularly served by leveraging Spike. In his case, it would be called Dust, but we have the season 2 normals here because they're pretty. Leveraging Spike to deal with Kai, or to deal with Soul's sweep and also his Night Raid Vortex. Just because that was kind of the lens we were looking at the matchup through at the time. So this is a pretty good time to introduce why Spike and cards like Spike are particularly useful for dealing with cards like Sweep. So we're going to be talking about something called the speed triangle and the speed curve in this episode. And we'll kind of return at the end to this idea of Kai versus Soul and how we can use the speed curve and the speed triangle to start to, again, make some informed plays about, or to use the information we have to make some sensible, informed plays. So we have here all of the normals in the game. We've got old grasp, cross, assault or slash, dive, a conspicuous gap here, and then spike or dust, sweep, focus, and block. And if we are still at the point where we're not super sure why things are statted the way they are in Exceed, everything kind of feels random to us. Hopefully, after the last episode, at the very least, power and guard values started to make a little bit more sense and seem a little bit more intentional in their placement on cards. Now we're going to talk about the same thing for speed. And just like how there seems to be sort of a relationship between speed and guard, we talked last time about how a lot of 4 guard cards have 4 speed, for example, and slower cards like sweep tend to have higher guard values, like 6. There is a similar relationship between speed and range that we're going to be talking about here. If you remember during the last episode, I laid out all of the cards from seasons 3 through 7 by guard value. And there were something like 350 cards that didn't have any guard on them at all. And given that we were talking specifically about hitting guard breakpoints, a naive viewer might think that those cards were completely useless because, well, why? I mean, they can't muscle through anything. What's the point of them? And obviously, there's a pretty easy answer to that. It's that they don't win combat by muscling through something and hitting back. They win combat by hitting first in the first place. We would call these cards fasts or pokes, depending on exactly where or when in the community you joined. You might have different names for cards like that. Contrast those with the sweeps and focuses and maybe blocks of the world that win combat, or at least in Block's case, don't lose combat very hard by soaking damage and then hitting back harder. We would call those slows or counterattacks. We'll get to the third arm of that triangle, the mid speeds, in just a second here. But You might notice when I lay out the normals in front of me, and let's pretend that there aren't any other cards in the game for a second here, because as we mentioned last time, the normals are the cards that everybody has access to. Frequently, they kind of form the backbone of Exceed math, capital E, capital M. You might notice that I have a 7 speed card, a 6, a 5, a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1, and a 0. That seems suspiciously convenient to me. I wonder if there's a pattern here. There is a pattern here. There are not very many cards that fall outside of the boundaries of this speed range. There are a few 8 or even 9 speed cards, but they're fairly rare. There are no cards that are slower than speed 0. This is sort of the effective range band or speed band of Exceed cards. And if we look at these 4 cards in particular, the cards that don't have any guard on them, we notice a kind of curious and very important relationship starts to appear, which is that my really, really fast card only hits at range 1, and my very fast but slightly less fast card hits at range 1 and 2. My pretty fast but not very fast card hits at range 3, and my medium fast card can hit out to range 4. This is the relationship between range and speed that I alluded to a second ago. It's called the speed curve. The speed curve is really, really important to Exceed math because of what happens when you break it. So let's kind of define that curve really quick here, which is that, as mentioned, fast things tend to have shorter ranges. That's just kind of the sort of single sentence definition of what the speed curve tells us. But specifically, things at range 1 tend to not be faster than speed 7. Things at range 2 tend to not be faster than speed 6. Things at range 3 tend to not be faster than 5, 4, and 4. I like to think of it as adding my maximum range to my speed and getting 8. I can see that 1 and 7 gets me 8, 2 and 6 gets me 8, 3, you'll forgive me for having to look at the before effect here, but Assault is a 1 range card that has before close 2. It is effectively a range 3 card. 3 and 5 gets me 8. Dives, advance 3 plus its 1 range gets me 4. 4 more gets me 8. I kind of think of the sum of the speed curve relationship as being 8. And I kind of think of it as like the speed limit. It's completely fine and often advantageous to play Cross at range 1, for example, or Assault at range 1, or Assault at range 2, or something like that. But you can't expect to be the fastest thing in your lane, I guess, to use a metaphor, in that situation, because you are using a card in a situation where faster things exist and can hit. That's the speed curve. That's sort of what that means. So when you break the speed curve, and every character has some ability to break the speed curve, even if it's just EX attacks. For example, EX Grasp is an 8 speed attack. You have the ability to overturn some useful strike interactions. Because these cards and cards like them don't have any guard on them, you are the only way that they can win combat is by going faster than whatever their opponent is doing, whatever your opponent is doing, rather. That doesn't mean that they always win combat if they do go faster. Again, we just talked quite extensively about what happens when, for example, Grasp runs into a sweep or a focus. It ain't pretty. But if they're going to win, they're going to win by being faster than their opponent. Again, we call these fasts. Contrast to slows that it doesn't really matter how much speed you add to them. They're probably not going to reach the speed limit anytime soon. Let's go look at Kai and Soul's kit again really quick here. I got their references. Hopefully, at least some of them. Yeah, there we go. So we can really quickly kind of diagnose what these cards are like supposed to do, literally just by looking at their speed and range values and seeing if we can make 8 That's kind of all we have to do for it. So these ones can go right here really fast. Remembering that Sol has an extra one. So let's look at these. We have something that this is effective range 4 with 5 speed. Now, wait a minute. Didn't I just say that 4 is the speed limit at range 4? And I did. Kai has something that is above curve at range 4. You were going to hear us say that word or those terms a lot in Exceed conversations. On curve, below curve, above curve. All that means is that there is an attack that is either faster than what is like quote unquote allowed by Exceed at a certain range, adhering to the speed curve on curve, which is to say a 4 speed 4 range attack, or below curve, maybe a I don't know, how about Stun Dipper? We got one of those too. I'm sorry, Stun Edge. This is at range 4. It would be below curve, right? As a matter of fact, Kai has all 3. Here is a above curve range 4 card. Here's an on curve range 4 card. Here is a below curve range 4 card. The fact that Kai has all 3 of these might tell us that he just likes to be at range 4 and has some options there before we even think at all about what these things might do. He just has a lot of cards that seem to hit out to range 4. It's also pretty easy when you're new to think of speed as being sort of like the defining stat. So, for example, well, I have a card that hits at range 4. Oops. I have a card that hits at range 4 at speed 5, and one that hits at range 4 at speed 4. Why would I ever bother with this one? And there are a few advantages to using Foudre Arc that we can get into if it's relevant. I guess the obvious one is that this one has 3 guard on it. It also hits a little bit farther out. It's actually a range 5 card. Of note, before we continue, the speed curve sort of stops at range 4 because there are no normals that hit that far out. There's no range 5 normal, for example. So when we're talking about the speed curve, we're really talking about things that occur in normals range. In other words, range 1 to range 4. So Kai has an above curve option that he could play on defense and would be able to stun out an opponent's dive, for example, even if they initiated with it. He has a card that is on curve at range 4, which is great. He has a slower option at range 4. Again, we'll get into why those things might be relevant in a second. He has a range 2 card that hits at range 7, at speed 7, excuse me. And again, oh, that's interesting. I just got done saying that 6 is the speed limit at range 2. Kai has something that hits above curve. Again, that's a special thing that Kai can do. This is a common enough shape in Exceed that we have a special name for it. We call it a DP or a Dragon Punch or a Shoryuken. It's named after Ryu's card that does something similar. Basically, any 7 speed attack that hits at range 2 is a DP. All that means is an above curve option that hits at range 2. All right, what else do we have? We have a range 2 card that is speed 4. Okay, so if I add 2 to 4, I get 6, which is less than 8. I can tell just by looking at it that this must be a below curve card. Okay, well, I know from looking at these cards that they are designed to win combat by going first. So if that's all cards like Foudre Arc and Diaraclade do, they can't be very good at it, can they? Because this is not fast enough to be on curve. This one is on curve, but has a faster option right next to it. So clearly, I can intuit, because I trust Exceed's designers, that there must be more to this card than just going fast, because it's not that great at going fast. It's below curve for its range. We have a speed 6 card that hits from ranges 2 to 6. That's incredibly fast for its range. And that's one of the reasons why this is an ultra. Because often, in order to break the speed curve, you do need to pay some kind of resource, and this is it. And then we also have a range, this is range 5 card that is only speed 1. And we can probably remember from our previous lesson that this, having this much guard on it, we can see it has 2 armor and 6 guard. This is pretty clearly designed to soak a hit and then hit back. This is never, ever, ever, ever getting to be on curve, ever. Before we actually consider these other cards that we keep alluding to as being kind of weird, let's look at Soul for a point of comparison. Because Soul has... This is an on-curve button at range 3. This is very analogous to Assault. It looks a lot like it. It's a 5-speed range 3 button. 5 plus 3 is 8. We can intuit just from that alone that we probably are trying to win with this card by going first. And in fact, we can actually go a step farther than that and say that if I have the option, all other things being equal, no other considerations in my head or on the board, between playing Gunflame or Assault, or any card like it, at range 1, range 2, or range 3, I probably want to do it at range 3, because that's where 5, the speed 5, is at the speed limit. So this is an adage that we can apply to every other card in Exceed, basically, every other fast card in Exceed. If I am playing a card that wants to win by going fast, I should play it at the range at which it is closest to being, as close to being on curve as I can. So I would prefer to play Gunflame at range 3 than I would at range 1 or range 2. Similarly, I would prefer to play Foudre Arc or Stun Dipper at range 4 probably most of the time, outside of some considerations that we'll get to in just a moment. Again. So, Gunflame, on-curve card, fast card, right? Volcanic Viper, slightly below curve. This is a range 2 card with 5 speed. Again, actually quite analogous to what we saw with Dire Claims. With Dire Clay, clearly there must be something going on with this card other than just its speed value that it is going to give me a reason to play it, because it's clearly not all that good at just winning by playing fast. Fafnir is quite similar. This is a range 1 to 2 4-speed card for 5 power. I'm sorry, range 1 to 3, but still below curve. This has basically dives speed with assault range, if you want to think of it that way. So same thing. Well, what is going on with this card? This one doesn't even have any guard on it. I don't understand. Gearface, what's going on here? Bandit Bringer, again, this is a range 1 to 3, really range 2 to 3 most of the time card, with 3 speed. A little bit of guard, but not very good at going fast. Night Raid Vortex, this one we know from last time. This looks a lot like Sweep. It's a range 1 to 4 card speed 2. Clearly not even trying to go fast, clearly doing something else. Wild Throw, range 1, speed 3, 3 guard. That's another one that is kind of in the middle, isn't it? It feels like it's not quite, it doesn't have enough guard to really be safe like Sweep is. It feels closer to something like a Fafnir, or maybe a Bandit Bringer. It's certainly not trying to go fast. It's not even close to Grasp, right? It's the speed limit here is 7. Among our ultras, we have, hey, this is another DP, isn't it? This is a 7-speed button that hits range 1 to 2. Notably, Kai can do exactly this for a special. Soul needs to invest in an ultra. He does not have an unmetered DP the way that Kai does. And Heavy Mob is a, most of the time, 1 to 4, speed 3, also below curve. So we have some things that map very obviously here. This is basically this. Night Raid is kind of Sweep-like in a lot of ways. We can kind of put Tyrant Rave and, again, I keep, hitting the spacebar. We can kind of put Tyrant Rave and Vapor Thrust together because they're doing something very, very similar. We could maybe think about Wild Throw, Fafnir, Bandit Bringer, Dire Clay, maybe even Foudre Arc in some ways, as all being kind of similar. Volcanic Viper as well. All of these cards are clearly in some kind of weird middle space, right? Where they're not quite fast enough to be fast, and they're not quite guardy enough to be slows or counterattacks. These we would all call, probably, most of the time, mid-speeds. You can't always intuit what a card does just by looking at them very quickly like this, but it's a really useful shorthand to be able to glance at a kit and say, this character has an on-curve button at 2, an on-curve button at 3, a 2 mid speeds, and a counterattack at with 6 guard, right? Like you can kind of get a sense of just what each card is sort of designed to do vaguely without even really reading it super carefully. Mid speeds tend to be a little bit more nebulous. We already know from before that what happens when a really fast thing runs into a really, really slow thing is that the really fast thing tends to just get out-traded really hard because these have great stats. They compensate for their low speed with just really strong damage-dealing abilities. And for example, Grasp can't move Sweep far enough away from it to dodge it. Okay, so these mid-speeds, analogous actually to these two normals here, Spike and Dive, are the things you can use to beat slows. Often they lose to the really fast things, and they beat the really slow things. So we have a triangle here, where really, really fast tends to beat the medium speed things. The medium speed things tend to beat the really slow things. The really slow things tend to beat the really fast things. This speed triangle holds true across basically every interaction in Exceed. And when it doesn't, a light bulb should be going off in your head. You should be saying, oh, that's important. That I can, for example, throw something that is on curve, there's that term again, something that is as fast as what is allowed at a certain speed, that also beats a slow thing. Those are rare and powerful. They need to be used carefully. And if you are looking for something to devote your resources to, some kind of target card to make better, building an on-curve shape that can deal with a slow is one of those sensible plays that I keep alluding to. So you could do that, for example, as we talked about last time, by taking Assault and amping its power enough to break a slow. Now you can throw Assault at range 3, be on curve, and break a slow thing. You have successfully reversed the speed triangle and Exceed. In the process, you've probably dealt 7 damage cleanly to your opponent. Odds are you're probably just going to win the game off of the value you generated off of that interaction. Similarly, you could get something to be on curve and yet beating a slow thing by taking a mid-speed, like Spike, which is speed 3 and has ignore armor and ignore guard, or Dive, which at range 3 can't be hit back as long as it has a chance to get to its before effect, and boosting its speed. So, for example, what if Spike had 5 speed instead of 3 speed? Well, then it would be on curve at range 3. It would be as fast as you're allowed to be at range 3, and it would stun anything slower than it. Spike is unbeatable now. Goodness me. And we have a boost here called Light that gives anything plus 2 speed. Okay, here's another awesome heuristic. It's really strong to take a mid-speed, one of these cards, one of the cards that is designed to crush slow things, and make it faster. That is as strong as making a really, really fast thing hit hard enough to break a really slow thing. So Light plus Spike, Light plus Dive is often just kind of unbeatable. or close to unbeatable, unbeatable with an asterisk. Almost everything in Exceed has a counter, even something like this. For example, I pass my turn by playing light. My opponent calls me out that I'm going to play spike. They initiate with assault. I lose the speed tie. If they pass the turn back to me without putting any speed down of their own, they're probably just going to take 5 damage and they're going to have to hold it. But yeah, that's a very valuable, quote unquote, sensible play that we keep talking about that we can think of. Let's return to this kind of glut of cards over here and think about them in terms of this mid-speed paradigm. What do they do? Well, okay. The obvious one is Bandit Bringer. Bandit Bringer really actually looks a lot like Spike. It's range 2 to 3 most of the time. It's speed 3. It has Ignore Guard on it. It has 4 guard of its own. Okay, that actually looks quite a bit like Spike. I can see why that is a mid-speed. It is a guardy mid-speed. It's a mid-speed with some guard on it. That guard might be valuable. It might not be. Sometimes a mid-speed like Spike, for example, will lose combat just by whiffing, even if it's not being stunned, for example. What about Dire Clay? Here's another kind of guardy mid-speed. Well, this doesn't have Ignore Guard on it. This doesn't have 7 power. It's not enough to break sweep. What's going on here? Well, we actually talked about this last time. If you use it at range 2, it will push sweep out of the way. It will push sweep to range 4. Sweep will whiff. So at range 2 in particular, Dire Clay is a mid-speed in that it beats sweep. It doesn't really ever beat focus. This is something that will come up pretty frequently among mid-speeds, is that often they don't beat all of them. They just beat one. That's especially true of these kind of guardier mid-speeds that are a little bit safer to use. Compare that to, I don't know, where's May's Command Grab? That's a good example. Let's pull that really fast here so we can look at an example of that. Oh, that's not how that works. Let's go get May's Overhead Kiss really quick. But yeah, so we can see this is unguarded at 3 speed at range 1. Obviously, this is phenomenally below curve, phenomenally unsafe. But it does beat hard everything slower than it, the same way that Spike does. Spike's guard can be a little bit deceptive because, as I mentioned with Bandit Bringer, it might not matter all the time. Compare that to Dire Clay, that actually is a fairly consistent card. It is strong enough to muscle through many cards faster than it, while still having a range band that allows it to hit back against a lot of those cards. So sometimes a mid-speed can be inconsistent, but crushing. Other times a mid-speed can be very consistent and easy to hit, but maybe it only deals with one side of the sweep and focus or block, even kind of cadre. We even talked last time that Dire Clay doesn't actually do very much to deal with Soul's Night Raid Vortex. So again, not all mid-speeds deal with all slows in the same way that not all fast buttons deal with all mid-speeds. I also should probably point out that Dive has been described as both a fast and a mid-speed here. That's true, it is. At range 4, it is a poke. It's the fastest thing available at speed 4, and yet it doesn't beat Sweeper Focus. You move to range 3, where it is below curve, and suddenly it does. So Dive pulls double duty as a poke sometimes and a mid-speed sometimes. Spike is basically always a mid-speed. Let's go back to our list here. We've got another card that seems to have this seems like it has a lot in common with Dire Clay, right? It's seems kind of consistent and guardy enough. It's pretty fast for being a mid-speed. This looks more like this than it looks like this, right? It's got some guard, it's fast enough, it's probably going to go off. All right, so if I hit with this card, that's 5 power, which is not enough to beat Sweeper Focus, and it has no positional benefits to it, and it has no ignore armor, ignore guard, and it's not fast enough to be fast, and it's not really guardy enough to be slow. Why is this here? What is this? Okay, let's remember that these cards are always exist in the context of their kit. And Soul is Mr. Bonus Power. And if he has, for example, any of his many cancelable power boosts in play, or if he's just in Exceed mode and cancels with anything, suddenly this is hitting for 7 or even 8. And that mid speed that doesn't beat any slows but is pretty consistent suddenly turns into a mid speed that does beat slows and is very consistent. Just becomes a really, really, really strong card. This is remember, every time you're evaluating a card, to consider what's going on when you use it kind of quote unquote the way you're supposed to. And this actually kind of informs a lot about about Soul's game plan. That when he's exceeded, slows just kind of get demolished, even by his pretty easy to use consistent cards. Similarly, Fafnir honestly really just looks like a worse Diaraclay. It has the same. It's got one more range on it. It's got the same power value, the same speed value, no guard, and a similar kind of push effect. It even closes afterwards, so it clearly can't beat Sweep. Its thing is, again, Soul can pump it up with his power boosts and completely shatter things with it. Excuse me. The comparison between Volcanic Viper and Fafnir is interesting because there are some overlap between them. They're both things that, when amped up with Soul's character ability, they tend to crush slow things. This one just kind of feels easier and better to use, and it kind of is, honestly. This is just a more consistent card. This is a kind of a mix-up button that you will push. It hitting out to range 3 is relevant. It having a push on it is relevant. There are a lot of sort of edge cases to this card that make it a usable thing, even alongside something more consistent than it. Wild Throw. Okay, so this one's got ignore armor, which is already, that feels kind of mid-speedy, right? It's range 1, so clearly it's well below curve. It doesn't have enough guard to be tanky, like a Sweep is. That, and we know from before that bonus power that Soul can push out, this is a crusher, exactly like Volcanic Viper and Fafnir is. These are haymaker cards, right? Foudra Arc is we only really brought this one down because it feels weird that Kai already has an above curve button that can't really it's tougher to find a use case for Foudra Arc when Stun Dipper exists. Okay, so now let's think about what happens when we use these two cards at range 1, for example, or even range 2. Both of them, if they're at this range, Kai throwing Stun Dipper into my opponent's grasp or cross, both would be cleanly stunned by it. Foudra Arc, meanwhile, doesn't get stunned by it. So this doesn't really feel like, well, wait a minute then. This is an on-curve button that beats other on-curve buttons, but only when it's below curve? Only when I'm using it close up, where these cards would be relevant and would hit, it can armor through them and hit back. That's not really a fast, it's not really a mid-speed, it's not really a slow. It's like a on-curve button you're using below curve to counterattack? That's weird. This is a kind of specific classification of card that comes up sometimes Sometimes it's called a fast counter, it's called a parry, it's called a cross catcher, it's called lots of things. But basically, there are some cards that are specifically designed to chase down fast things, specifically cross. That's a very common one for reasons that we'll get into near the end of the lesson. But Foudre Arc is a card that can be used at range 4 as a poke. It can be used as kind of a cross catcher or grasp counter. It can be used to hit through fast fireballs. It's kind of just like a do anything generalist card. It doesn't really adhere to this triangle, and that's something else to probably keep in mind. That the triangle is a guideline that happens a lot in Exceed, but it isn't like an ironclad. It's not an engine level law. It's not something that like without it, if you break the speed curve, a judge will come and award you a game loss. That's not how it works. Things don't quite adhere to the speed triangle all the time. Hopefully this is kind of demonstrative of what we're talking about here. Let's pull one more character really fast and see what we can glean. How about who's another fairly easy character to look at here? How about Giovanna? Just keeping it among our Guilty Gear folks here. So again, all I'm going to do here is look at the stats and just eyeball it, right? Okay. Sol Nascente, 6 speed, 2 range. That's probably a fast, right? Triple kick, 5 speed, 3 range. That's probably a fast. Sepultura, 3 and 4. That's probably a mid speed. Sol Poente, 2 and 3. That's probably a mid speed. Travau, 2 and 5. That's like a bad slow. Ventania, 2 and 7. That's a DP. That's above curve. It's also 4 gauge. Tempestad, that's 4 speed. I'm sorry, 4 range, 6 speed. That's also super above curve. Cool. And let's look really fast. The fast thing, yeah, it's fast. It's gonna be a poke. It's not ever gonna crush anything slow. Triple kick, it's without some help, it's not gonna crush anything slow. Sol Poente, it's got Ignore Guard on it sometimes. That's gonna crush a slow thing. It's clearly a mid speed. Sepultura, it has Closer Retreat 1. Okay, so at range 3, this can be used to dodge a sweep. At range 2, it could be used to dodge a focus. It can be used farther away to dodge a slow projectile, for example. So this is actually kind of analogous to something like Direclay, where you are pushing a slow thing out of the way. This one, you're ducking into it or something like that. Travau, before close 3. Yeah, this is basically like slightly worse Night Raid Vortex. And then our above curve buttons. Actually, this is super above curve when you initiate with it. This is above curve pretty much all the time. That's actually a important kind of heuristic as well. If you have something that's above curve, what that means is that it's often a very strong defensive option because it's something that your opponent can't be faster than, even if they initiate. Initiators win speed ties. That's one of the big advantages of attacking in Exceed. Having a above curve button means that even on defense, you have something that you can be quite sure will go first, which can be very relevant to, for example, if I know for sure that if I'm at range 4 and I have, I don't know, I'm at range 2 and I have Ventania in play, for example, I might be very comfortable putting down Let's Rock. Because I'm passing my turn, all I'm doing is gaining power, but I'm confident enough that I'm going to hit even on defense that I might be able to afford to gamble a little bit. So, heuristics that we've learned. Putting a lot of power on a fast thing to stun a slow thing is quite strong. Putting a lot of speed onto a mid-speed thing to stun a slow thing is quite strong. Putting power onto an above curve thing is strong even on defense, often, especially if you can use it to also beat a slow. If you've got something that is fast enough to be above curve and also strong enough to stun a slow, that is, first of all, it's probably an ultra. Second of all, it's probably unbeatable. No considerations at all given to things like how many turns you're spending building attacks like this and how feasible they are. That's all stuff that you're going to realize in the moment that things are much more complicated than this. But as we are pushing towards, again, making sensible plays, these are all good rules of thumb to keep in mind. If you have a mid-speed and a speed boost, put them together. If you have a really, 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 really fast thing and a power boost, maybe think about putting them together. If you have an above curve button, think about holding that in reserve on defense. If you have an on curve button, you might need to initiate with it because you're trying to specifically win by going fast, and really the best way to do that is by winning speed ties. You can even intuit just by the number of real fast things or unguarded mid speeds even that you have, how often you want to be attacking. Giovanna is a character who wants to attack quite frequently, and she has a poke, an unguarded mid speed, an unguarded mid speed, and her above curve options are metered. They cost a lot of resources, and her slow option is pretty bad. We can even look at her character ability and see, as an action on my turn, in other words, I get hit draw 1. All of this is telling me that this is a character who wants to swing pretty consistently. And as I gain experience with this game and its kind of vocabulary, I can pretty quickly intuit what a character wants to do just by looking at the attack shapes and maybe the character ability, not even getting into things like boosts. As we wrap up, let's return to Sol and Kai. At the end of the last lesson, as mentioned, we were talking about, well, what does Kai do about Sol's sweep and Night Raid Vortex? And we hit on, well, maybe Spike could be something, hang out at range 2 and threaten Spike to make them afraid to play cards like this. Let's return to Kai's kit here. I'm just going to spawn a new one because there's so much going on this board now. Let's return to our Kai kit here and bring Spike down. Because we were talking last time about what Kai can do specifically using his kit to break a breakpoint, right? And the way that we were thinking about that was adding power to things. And what we were kind of coming up empty. Well, now we have this idea of a mid-speed that's entered our arsenal now. And let's look at his kit again, and we can see, wait a minute, this is a speed boost. That synergizes pretty well. Or actually, let's honestly just bring Dive in here too. They're both mid-speeds. Well, hold on. These are both mid-speeds. This is a speed boost. What if I try, well, okay, maybe he's playing around Diaraclay as an attack too much, and he's hanging out at range 3. Maybe I can throw Faith down and threaten Dive. Maybe I can, hey, this is another speed boost. Be Just or Be Dead. Maybe I can combine this with my mid-speeds and deal with Sweep or Night Raid Vortex. This one, same. Holy Orders. Oh, wow. Hit gain advantage even. Both of these are cancelable too, so I don't even need to pass turn to my opponent. So I could, if I was Kai, all at once, if I'm really, really afraid of Sweep or Night Raid Vortex, and I'm at range 1 where I don't really want to be against Sol, I could put down a boost like this, cancel it with some gauge. Kai's character ability says the first time I cancel, I can advance or retreat 1. I back up 1, and now I canceled and I can throw Spike at speed 4, or maybe a speed 5 Diaraclay that can deal with the sweep or something like that. And then I gain advantage on hit. And wait a minute, Sol's character ability here only works when he canceled. So he needs to take his turn. So maybe I can leverage my resource advantage with Kai to take a lot of turns in a row all with some bonus speed, and just keep Sol from being able to use his bonus power while also threatening things like Dive and Spike to deal with those problem cards that I was talking about before. This is starting to feel a little bit like a game plan. And all we're doing here is combining breakpoints and the speed curve, or the speed triangle. That's kind of it. And again, there's so much more to Exceed, where we're talking about long-term option management and information bleed and reads, threats, using things below curve intentionally to provoke certain options. There's so many other things going on in Exceed. But just these basic concepts, if you can use them against other players around your skill level, if they're also just throwing cards at random and you're taking a mid-speed and putting speed on it, or taking an above curve option and putting power on it, you're just going to win, right? You're just going to run them over on kind of like level 1 tricks until they get to that level 2, and then you can start to add more things to your arsenal. Learn how breakpoints work, learn how the speed curve works, combine them together. You can often just sort of win on the back of that alone. In fact, this kind of play is not really as easy to do anymore, because the compared to, like, we have +2 power, +2 speed in old seasons. Newer seasons of Exceed tend to issue really, really high bonuses, like stat bonuses, numbers, in other words, for cancels and things like that, like action compression, and that's where they tend to make their money. It's a little bit harder to make a completely unbeatable strike in Exceed. But just for the sake of it, we could conceivably combine our two concepts here, our breakpoint math and our speed curve, to make something literally, utterly unbeatable, right? I'm sure we could. So let's use our Sol versus Kai matchup again, and let's just say, all right, so I have Spike in my hand as Kai. I'm at range 3, and I boost Be Just or Be Dead, cancel, boost Holy Orders, cancel, strike with Spike, right? I've made something all on my turn, all at once, with no opportunity for my opponent to do anything about it. I played a mid-speed that's on curve. It is going to beat everything slower than it. It's already as fast as it can be for its range. I win, right? I did it. And then my opponent responds with a cross that doesn't hit, because I'm at range 3, remember? And this is when I finally learn that just because I got to be on curve, I don't just win for free, because my opponent has done something that has denied me 2 gauge, 2 boosts, and a strike worth of value for just 1 card. That's something that we're going to talk about next time. How to deny value, how to use your cards in ways that maybe don't quite that aren't as obvious as just playing them on curve, for example. But that's kind of a teaser for next time. Again, I hope this was helpful. I'm looking forward to doing a couple more of these. I will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.